All right, everyone, here we are. It's whatever day it is that you're listening to this. I love it. I love it. It's like, hey, happy Monday. Who knows when someone's listening to this? So,
Yeah, yeah.
whatever day it is, have a great day. Today's gonna be cool. We talk a lot about symptoms a lot and how like symptoms can help you understand what's happening, what might be triggering things that are happening in the body. A lot of times from we're just talking like the body health portion of it, it's like, oh, I have all these symptoms and I don't know why. And so a lot of times we're talking about, well, if you have this, this, and this, that's kind of presentation of environmental exposure or whatever might be going on. Um, we're going to go like a layer deeper into this today. One of the biggest reported symptom sets that we have for our clients specifically is brain fog or cognitive issues. It's one of the biggest things. It's actually number 2 on our list. It's just a very, very big deep dive of the last year of what everybody has been reporting on. All right, it's number 2. Number 1, everyone, chronic fatigue, in case you're wondering. Number
Okay, I
2,
needed to know. I needed to know. That was going to be my question, but I was waiting.
so with that in mind, so we have Dr. Trish Leigh on.
Okay.
Not Leon, Lee on, Dr. Trish Leigh on the show. She's a cognitive neuroscientist, which is great because, again, number 2, cognitive, brain fog, all of that stuff. So Dr. Leigh, she runs a global neuro coaching company, and she helps people with chronic complex health issues, how to kind of address that from the brain, cognitive side. And the thing with exposures, environmental exposures, we'll focus a bit on mold, maybe like expand out a little bit today or whatever. But that is a very, very big component of it. And while removing the trigger is obviously very important, right? Remove the root cause of what's causing the problem. You then still have the mess that has left after you remove the root cause from something. And then it's about how do we fix that? How do we treat that? And a lot of times the conversations are really focused around, detox and getting your gut in line and getting this, that, or the other. But the brain impact is incredibly important. And so this episode is really cool because we could talk about some things that can be done that are maybe the equivalent of, okay, here's now your binder protocol and here's this and here's that, but things that you can do to help your brain sort of bounce back and get to where it needs to get to. And so that is the goal of today. So if you want your brain to work, keep listening.
Yes.
Anyways, I'll hand it over to Dr. Leigh now. Love for you to just kind of tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into being a cognitive neuroscientist, which sounds
Sure.
really hard.
Yeah,
Uh,
it is.
and,
But it is. I just told my daughter today. Well, thank you for having me, first of all.
of course.
I am the mom of 5 children. So my youngest, four of them are off in college, believe it or not. And my youngest is 14. And I just said to her today, I'm like, I love my work so much. My hope for everybody in the whole world is that they love their work as much as I love mine. And the way that that happened, it's a long story and I won't even tell you, but I always joke that my life happens in 7-year chapters. And I didn't write it that way. It's being written for me in that way. So I was a college professor for a very long time. My work pivoted into researching and teaching about neuroscience and neurological tools that people can use to help themselves with cognitive issues, and then it cognitive thinking, but then it expanded out to more issues like physical and mental health issues. Then I opened my own practice using something called neurofeedback and brain mapping. My husband still runs that practice. I live in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. We have a brick and mortar practice. But then the next chapter came along, and I took my show on the road. I found finally, after searching for a long time, online portals and software that can be used at home. I've partnered with some of the leading companies in the world, and we've had a relationship for a decade of being able to bring this technology to people in their homes to help them. So that's how I started in cognitive neuroscience. Now, why I'm here and why I care about toxic exposure, environmental toxins is because I'm also like the hair club for men. If you remember that commercial, he's like, you can see his hair plugs and he's like, I'm also a client. Well, I moved when I left my college, my university professor position. I moved from New York to North Carolina. which now I know is one of the moldiest places in the world. I bought a home, and without knowing it, we moved in, and it had a lot of environmental toxins. So I was perfectly fine when I moved in, and over the years, I became sicker and sicker and sicker. It happened to be in the wall of my office. My family got low key symptoms that we can talk about. I got high key symptoms. So I pivoted a lot of my work. I had to, like, my life literally depended on it. So, one thing I want to say before I throw it back to you is that people forget that our brains are literally the supercomputer that runs everything else in our system. So I can talk about chronic fatigue. That comes from autonomic nervous system dysfunction, a brain that's locked up in a dysregulated pattern. Symptom number one. Symptom number two, brain fog and cognitive issues. It also comes from an autonomic nervous system dysfunction. All the symptoms come. My primary symptom, because I've always trained my brain, I had a lot of inflammation and skin issues. Thankfully, I barely ever had any cognitive or energy issues, which, I did, but they came on so slowly and never to a catastrophic level. But I'd love to go deep and wide in terms of thinking about how your brain is running the show in all these other aspects. There's a gut brain axis. We know this in new neuroscience that our brains are directly connected to our guts. Like your brain is running that. We have to consider how the brain plays into everything people are experiencing.
I love this. So we said a lot of things that people probably don't know what it means. So let's start
Great.
digging into that. Let's talk to you about the autonomic, nervous system,
Mhm.
what dysfunction means. So you
Mhm.
basically connected that to the top two symptoms that I said our clients have when they come in. So can we dig into that a bit? What does it
Yep.
mean?
Yeah, really easily. So, the autonomic nervous system is the automatic nervous system. It's kind of running things automatically. It has two main branches. The first one is called sympathetic. You probably know it as fight or flight mode. That's sympathetic. The other branch is parasympathetic rest, digest, relax. So, when you're exposed to environmental toxins, it puts your system in sympathetic dominance. Your system goes on red alert because it is under attack by these toxins. And that's why removing exposure is number one. And honestly, I wish my first doctor would have told me that because that would have saved me a lot of time and energy. But when you remove yourself from the exposure, the first goal is to bring the brain and the nervous system out of this sympathetic dominance red alert mode. Because when you stay in red alert mode, it jams up your detox pathways. It affects your gut. It keeps inflammation going. It keeps mast cell activation, which keeps all your cells on red alert. So, those are the two branches. And basically, it keeps you locked in fight or flight, and it makes it very difficult for your system to relax where healing happens.
Yeah, it's a good explanation. I think a lot of people have probably heard of sympathetic, parasympathetic, at least people who are listening to this, but like hearing and just the broad like where it lives in terms of the body system. So the thing that I just thought of, I always like think of analogies and things to try to make things make sense all the time. So like when you were describing that yesterday, my 4-year old uh bumped his head or he did something, whatever. And so he starts crying, right? And actually, I think he got scared. This is what it was. He got scared. He like almost fell off the couch or something, right? And so I
Mhm.
grabbed him. He's crying uncontrollably. He's freaked out, right?
Mhm.
And the problem was gone, right? So he said,
Mhm.
step number one, remove the trigger. The trigger was
Mhm.
gone. There was no trigger.
Mhm.
He wasn't falling anymore. Everything was fine. But he was just locked into this I am crying, I am crying, I can't stop crying thing. And
Mhm.
so we kind of had to like snap him out of it, right?
Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
there's different ways where we'll do things to kind of like snap him out of it so he doesn't keep spiraling in it. But
Yes.
this to me sounds just like that. It's like you took the environmental exposure away, right? We're going to be under the assumption, everyone, that you've found wherever the issues are in the house, you've remediated them, you've reduced your load, and now we're trying to figure out how to like get your brain kind of back on track again, right? So you've removed exposure, and now you're still that crying 4-year old that
Mhm.
is still crying because it's still scared, right?
Mhm.
And so
Yeah.
how do I snap them out of it, right? We have our
Yeah.
little tricks that
Yeah.
we do snap
And
them out.
when my kids were young, it makes me think, now they're growing older, but when that would happen, I developed very early on when I would rush in, I would say, "Are you scared or hurt?" So, of course, I said that all the times that it happened. So they immediately could tell me if they were scared or hurt, because if they're scared, that's a different pathway for healing than it is for hurt. Some of the times they were hurt and we had to go, urgent care. Most of the
Yep.
times they could start to recognize for themselves, I am scared. And then the scared was the co regulation, the comfort that I could provide to bring them back out of sympathetic dominance. So, absolutely. One other thing I want you to know is I can see this in people's brains. Using QEEG brain mapping, I can see the sympathetic dominance. I can see the inability or the low ability to get into parasympathetic. And I can see the neurorigidity. The systems, people's nervous systems really get locked in this. And again, like, it's not always mind driven. Many times it is physiologically driven, which is maddening as a person who is experiencing it. But pacing and really trying to get into parasympathetic and stay out of sympathetic is the key, is the key.
I really like that you said that, because when we think about what we're talking about, I think you automatically go to the brain. It's like, oh, my brain's in fight or flight, like my brain is this, but it's like your body is triggering the response in the brain. And so it's figuring out like what's causing that response to then be able to handle it. So you talked about the ability to see where you're sitting via brain mapping. Can you talk a
Mhm.
little bit more? You mentioned brain mapping earlier as something
Yeah.
that
Yeah. So
you do.
QEG brain mapping is a really powerful way. And again, you can do it at home. It takes 28 minutes. And up on my app, I have my own app, Dr. Trish Leigh. On the app comes your brain map. And you will be able to see if your brain is stuck in those extra fast speeds, basically that stress activation, that fight or flight mode. It lights up as red. If your brain is having difficulty getting into that parasympathetic state, it's blue, low ability. If you have chronic fatigue, the extra slow speed, it's called delta, it will be red. Chronic fatigue just pops right off the page. It's the same speed or very similar to those that cause cognitive issues, brain fog, thinking difficulty. So you can just see what's at the root of the issue and then regulate it back. I use something called neurofeedback, and thankfully I now have, very high level skills, and especially when it surrounds these ideas of complex chronic health issues, that it trains the brain to come out of that mode. It unlocks the neurorigidity, it creates more neuroplasticity. That's the first and foremost important thing. Just like you said, with your child, you have to unlock it and get moving in the right direction. And then the detox pathways start opening up, and all the things that people are trying will work better. Because if you're locked in sympathetic dominance, like, you can take 1,000 binders, but your detox pathways are jammed up, you know, it won't come out. And trust me, I know, I was there for a while, you know.
Yeah, it's funny. There's like an order of events to make things more effective. It's the
Mhm.
same way, like just very focused on like how to remediate a house. There's an order in how you remediate so you don't screw up the thing you did before.
Mhm.
And like there's an order that just makes things easier, right?
Mhm.
And if
There
your
is.
brain isn't working against all of the things you're trying to do, it's probably going to make it easier than trying
Yeah.
to go backwards and go the other way.
Yeah, and before
Um,
this happened to me, I always focused on ADHD and anxiety and neurodevelopmental issues and cognitive decline. I never really understood the impact of environmental toxins on autonomic nervous system dysfunction. It took a while for it to click for me, which is why I struggled and suffered for too long. Once I realized it, uh, pacing became my friend, more rest became what I needed to do, figuring out what mostly worked for me the best and sticking to a flexibly scheduled routine, less trying, more flowing. That was the solution, even though it felt counterintuitive.
So you mentioned in your app, you're able to see like this color coded. I'm just kind of visualizing sort of what you're saying. So is it like a like kind of app game based stuff that's sort of triggering that's like understanding your responses? Is there some sort of device that you wear
No.
while you're doing
Yeah,
it?
yeah,
Like
you don't do anything. It's resting state. Um, so there's a headband, which is the hardware, and it connects
Mhm.
to a sensor that we move, and we can sense what's happening in any of the brain areas. It uses electroencephalogram. which is, sort of kind of similar to, people know EKG to read how your heart is performing. It's similar to that, but it can read all the areas and the levels of dysregulation in all of these modes, whether it be too much fatigue, difficulty with cognition, not able to relax, accidentally stuck in a depressed mode, or this hypervigilant mode of extra fast speed. So
Interesting.
it reads it and then it displays it. It's a visual display. That's the brain mapping. Now, neurofeedback's different. So once you have your brain map, me or I have people on my team who will walk you through your brain map, explain it all to you, you know exactly what's happening. Then
Mhm.
I set the protocols for a particular person depending upon what their brain is doing. I never do it based on symptoms because the dysregulation in the brain is the driver for the symptoms. So then I set the protocols to either train down what there's too much of or train up what there's not enough of. That's where the games or streaming or audio come into play. The way that the training works is it's like a workout for your brain. It uses something called operant conditioning that's been around for over 100 years and we know is an effective way to affect change. But basically, you use the app and you can stream Netflix. When your brain is hitting the marks of the parameters that I've set, the screen plays bright and the audio plays louder. When your brain's going back to that locked up sympathetic dominant mode, the screen goes dim, the audio goes low. And then basically your brain will work to see what is on the screen, and the system automatically makes it more difficult. So your brain gets stronger and it auto thresholds to make it more challenging, and it moves you forward. And then, of course, I change the protocols if I need to or do whatever I need to.
That nobody can see the look on my face right now. I'm trying to like process it. Just like, why is he not talking?
Now, if you're about to tell me you're a skeptic, I'm okay with
No,
that.
I'm not. I'm
Because
not at all.
I've heard that 1,000 times, but it works. It's been around for a long time. Highly effective. What are you
No,
what are you thinking about?
I was gonna say that. I was actually gonna like dig in a little deeper on it a little bit. So the way that I'm hearing this is the app is basically programmed on the back by you for whatever the protocols are based on current readings or how frequently you do readings. And then you mentioned Netflix. So what, you're watching stuff, you're playing games, like what's happening? Like,
Yep, you can watch whatever you want. So
classes,
salience, and
training.
if you've met me, I know all the research on everything. Like, obviously I don't, but I read all the research of what applies to what I do all the time. So of course I dug in. I'm like, is a game more salient? The word salience. So like, I encourage people to start with streaming and watch something they want to see, something meaningful. That's what salience means. Something you actually want to watch. So, people will just watch Friends or they'll just binge watch something light. During the session, it's like a workout. And the feedback, it's called neurofeedback. The feedback is the modulation of the video and the audio. But this is the easiest way. And then I can tell you more specifics. Like, if you want to get big biceps, do you have to talk to somebody at length about how you get your biceps bigger? No. You just need 20-pound weights and you need to start repping some bicep curls. Once your biceps get stronger, you need to swap out the 20-pound weights for 25 and then 30 and then 40. That's what the system does. We identify which muscles are weak in your brain. I set the protocols to strengthen those muscles in the way that they need to. You do the reps by watching the show or doing the games, whatever feels best to you to get started. Everything I do has a truckload of data. I can see how your brain performs within and across all the sessions. So all the people who work with me, we see your brain getting better in real time. If it's not, that means you're still being exposed or you're still jamming your system up in some way. It could just be stress. Some of the people I work with, they work 70 hours a week and they don't ever stop. And I'm like, there's no room for parasympathetic in a 70-hour work week.
This is really cool. When you said I could see your brain, I thought you were like literally referring to what I was looking like and like reading my mind right now.
No, people think so.
That sounds like, oh, she's on me. let's talk about this in the frame we are, and then I have other questions on like
Mhm,
how and like other applications of this, I think.
mhm,
So let's maybe continue down the path of when you are in sympathetic. That sounds very black or white. It's like you're either sympathetic or parasympathetic. But then for more what I'm hearing, like there's other kind of, there's like a downstream of different elements that are contributing to
and
it.
there's shades of gray. Everything exists on a continuum, and I can see that in the map. Like, basically, the
One,
map uses standard deviations, levels away from optimal. So I can see if you're 1 level away in sympathetic dominance. I can see if you're 3+ levels, which is 99.9% in sympathetic dominance. On the progress visualization graphs that I have, I can see a person's brain change in real time. So I can see it go from 99% dysregulated to 50 to 40 to 30 to 20 to 10 to none. There's shades of gray
what
for sure. It's different for all people.
what do you see when you're seeing someone that has where the let's call it the root cause or one of the core contributors is an environmental trigger? Like how does that look? Like can you describe what that looks like in your map?
Yeah, I call it a brain on fire, because those fast speeds are all red, yellow, and orange, just like flames. And that is what creates, I mean, it's born out of hypervigilance. Your nervous system had to go into hypervigilance if it's being attacked. That's what mast cell activation is that eventually your system doesn't know when it's actually being threatened versus not being threatened. And I have a
Mhm.
couple, really good stories there. One about a Turkish rug. I will never buy a rug from Turkey ever again. Just the chemicals that were on it. Like I had no clue. I was already on my way to healing. I buy this rug, I put it in the living room. I told you mine was all skin and inflammation. I wake up, my eyes are swollen shut. So like that's my mast cells. My mast cells, and that's a chemical. But
Yep.
honestly, I felt like I began to become the litmus test for what's healthy for everybody, even though the other people weren't exploding. If I exploded, that thing wasn't good for everybody in the room. You know what I mean?
It just hit you first.
I've changed it hit me first because my system was so high up here, a brain on fire. That's what the brain on fire. So, a lot of people I work with have mold poisoning because of my journey, and many of them are women, and they'll be like, I just tried to have 2 sips of Chardonnay. And, they're like, and I exploded, or I felt the brain fog and I couldn't. Alcohol's a neurotoxin. And if you get it from California, it's very moldy. So, like, you become the litmus test with all of these triggers. But once your system's strong enough and you're out of this brain on fire, a glass of wine is no longer a threat to the system. The system comes back down and it can scan for actual threats versus non-threats.
How, so you mentioned that a lot of people that you work with, you see this pattern in their maps. Like how many people do you think when you're looking, at least for the people you work with, there is an environmental trigger that's part of what they're dealing with?
Well, that's interesting. I don't know how to answer your question. Most of the people I work with have screen addictions.
Mm.
So, from YouTube to drama to podcast to explicit matter. But that actually puts them at a much higher risk for indoor environmental exposure. Because if you're sitting around in your basement or your home, you're actually outdoor. You're not outdoors in fresh air as much as you would be if you had a balanced life. So, um, I will definitely go someday, but I haven't done it yet. That everybody I work with, takes a mycotoxin test because they're fairly affordable. And so for the people that I had a concern about, or those that really knew that they had these triggers to environmental exposures, those people I recommended they do the mycotoxin test, and all the people came back with mycotoxins.
Everyone where you kind of saw it light up like that, they all had
And,
it.
and everyone that also had, they knew like anytime they went to their office, they felt worse. They had chronic fatigue. Like the last woman that's on the top of my mind, every time she went to her office and she came home, that's my experience. Like in my experience, I'm like, this house is doing something to me. I have no clue what. Because if I was away from it or if I was outside, I would start to feel better. And then I come home and I start to feel worse. And I'm like, people who have that experience, like they know that they're having some triggers, they're easy to map. to connect the dots on. But to answer your question, like, I would imagine that the vast majority of the people who did not take mycotoxin tests would have environmental exposure. There's only one person who was very concerned because his office was in a barn and he did a mycotoxin test, no mycotoxins. One person out of all the people that I have recommended. So that was really interesting. I'm like, there is one. I thought there'd be none.
There is one. But mycotoxin testing has limitations in the body too. So there's times where someone could be so toxic that they don't show any in their urine mycotoxin test because it just holds it and it doesn't even let it come out. So it's interesting.
I know. My mycotoxins went up for years. The first test, I had major problems. So my first tests were too high, but then they kept going up and up and up. And that was, obviously it felt terrible, but I'm like, this is good because more are coming out. But I was very eager for the day they started to go down, and that day came, thankfully.
Yeah.
So I understand. I understand for sure.
So we're doing neurofeedback, we're doing retraining. So let's talk about what environmentally triggered mind sort of looks like and what areas within it. So you mentioned that you'll either try to dial up or dial something down specifically based on what you're programming in the app. So can you talk a little bit like the most common areas that need to get dialed up or dialed down, I guess, from that perspective?
Yep. Yeah, so I will also see the chronic fatigue. So I didn't mention this yet. The chronic fatigue pattern is too much slowing. So our brains basically have speeds that they're supposed to shift seamlessly between, like an automatic transmission. That's the car analogy that I use. If you have healthy circadian rhythms, basically you feel calm and focused throughout the day. If you need to concentrate, you can. Something stressful happens, your brain spikes up into sympathetic, but then comes back down when the threat is gone. That's how evolutionarily our brains are designed, right? A tiger tries to attack me, I go on red alert, tiger's gone, I bring it down. If you stay in sympathetic dominance for a long time, the fatigue part of your brain goes up. That's that slow speed, sleep mode. So I also see this. People are walking around. It's primarily their frontal lobes and the temporal lobes in the front and over the ears, mostly in the front. In the front, that's the prefrontal cortex. It's the area for judgment, executive function, which is planning, organization. It's basically the thinking part of the brain that makes us different from animals. So especially when this is a two-pronged loop too, unfortunately, especially when you have an issue like this. First of all, your brain is going into this mode because of the exposure from the toxins. But then you're stressed out about it. So you're reinforcing it with your mind, and being stressed out about it is part of it also. And for me, I had to employ a lot of strategies to bring the stress down. So, and I sometimes still do, honestly. Like, I really didn't travel for a long time because I didn't want to be in hotels and things like that. And, I took my family to the beach in North Carolina, a lot of environmental toxins. And the place looked great and clean online. We get there, there's visible mold in the air duct. And I'm like, fam, and I have a very big family. I'm like, family, we can't stay here. And I'm like, I'm tweaking already. It is stressing me out. There's no way I can sleep here. You know what I mean? So I called the people. They were very gracious. I had to pivot, bring the whole family to a hotel. They're all cool because we've had such an experience. Nobody, everybody flows now. But, the idea is just the stress of that will actually, could put you at risk of a reaction, even though you weren't exposed because of that two-pronged approach. And that's the frontal lobe at work. It's overly thinking and it's on overdrive. So the frontal lobe is all the thinking. That's why you'll have a cognitive impairment or brain fog, because you're basically exhausting that system too by being in sympathetic dominance. Over the ears, those are the emotional regulation areas. So, you're trying to regulate yourself emotionally, and those areas will, be subjected also.
Yeah, that makes sense. That lines up with a lot of the verbal communication, what people are dealing with when they're talking about the cognitive stuff. It's the judgment, executive function. It's like, I can't work anymore, or I'm slower at work, or I need to take time off. And then it's the the emotional part, which is the overwhelm, the, all those other things that go on. And then you talk about like stress being like an additive to that, like just, living stress and, how do I handle this? What do I do? What if it's the worst thing? Oh, my husband's not on board with me. Oh, this, and all that stuff. And it just kind of like pokes
Oh
the
yeah,
fire and
so
like,
stressful, so stressful.
yeah,
And the sensory motor cortex, just to add one thing, because I'm just thinking, the sensory motor cortex basically goes from ear to ear across the midbrain too. So a lot of people will have sensory perception issues, pain perception challenges, motor issues. And unfortunately, too, I've experienced a handful of those. I had a swallowing disorder. Thankfully, I only had a swallowing disorder for maybe like a week. It was in the week before I moved out where I kept choking and I'm like, I didn't know yet about my house. I had all these symptoms brewing. I also had internal tremors where I was buzzing. I buzzed for a couple of years and that is sympathetic dominance. Your nervous system is so heightened. I didn't even know I was buzzing until it started to turn off. I would have these moments of, mainly when I was asleep or like falling asleep and real relaxed, it would turn off for a second. And then I'm like, I buzz. This is great.
Yeah, and I've heard that too for many people that they've felt something like that going on.
Yeah,
So the
really interesting.
sensory piece is interesting because that brought up like in my mind. So I also like trying to think of like other ways. So I'm trying to like connect the dots in is my like working in real time right now of what you're saying. Of like hearing people where they're talking about like their kids, for example, where they're starting to see like OCD type of things with them, or they're starting to see tics, or they're starting to see things that are happening and they're trying to figure it out and they can't figure it out. And when you describe the sensory portion, the connector of the brain that you just said, where you said you're like felt like you're constantly choking all the time, like the kid that constantly feels like they need to like clear their throat or they need to burp or they're coughing for no reason constantly, and there's really seems to be no reason. Do you see that connection as being something from like a trigger that can cause those types of reactions?
Absolutely. So to back up to OCD comes from the brain pattern that I told you, the brain on fire. So you'll have obsessive thoughts. That comes from the fast speed, rumination, hypervigilance, thoughts that never stop. The more creative they are, there's usually more of that extra slow speed, delta, that I told you about. The slow speeds add to the creativity. So, like many of the people I work with, they'll have irrational fears, or they will have this loop of these, kind of fantastical, not real thoughts that lead them to compulsions to feel better. Some of them are sensory processing issues. So, like, if you're clearing your throat, there might be a sensation in there because the perception of senses isn't happening well. Like for me also, I always do it in quotes, I don't even mean to, but like quote unquote Bell's palsy, my left eye wouldn't close. That's motor control. My left eye stopped closing because the motor signals from the sensory motor cortex sending them down to my eye stopped working as well as they could, and my eye wouldn't close, which then of course led to a whole bunch of problems because my eye was drying out and all of that.
Right.
My son, one of my sons, all my kids got different. It can be a cruel joke because everybody in the family gets different symptoms. So you can't connect the dots. Nobody's experiencing the same thing. One of my sons had random nosebleeds, and I did not know this was a symptom. And until, of course, I looked it up. People have died from nosebleeds from mold poisoning. Do you know that? That's crazy. Just blew my mind. So, of course, the minute he got better, the minute we got out of the exposure, which was such a blessing, but he had had these random nosebleeds for a couple years for no reason. So that was one symptom. To speak to mental health, my oldest daughter, extreme anxiety. She's still recovering from that. And she was in a hot spot of being exposed. So I think that's why her symptoms were, heightened. My youngest daughter had symptoms like me, mostly skin. And the skin
Mhm.
issues, it's basically the toxins are trying to burst out of your skin. They can't get out
Yeah.
fast enough because your detox pathways are jammed up, so they burst out of your skin. That's why it's essential to bring the energy in the system down so they can flow. They flow out better when you do that.
It's really interesting because I hear so many times, like when people come to us, a lot of times their kids are the reason, right?
Mhm.
And it's a lot of these things, right?
Mhm.
It's skin issues, it's the nose, it's constant nose, it's constant coughing, it's get a little further down the road, it's pandas, it's autism,
Mhm.
it's significant behavioral changes, it's late onset bedwetting, it's like all these different things.
All
And
all neurological, just to remind you, all neurological.
so the system that what we've been talking about, what you have with the mapping and kind of the app and the training and stuff. Like, do you have a lot of kids that you work with? Like, what's
Mhm.
that look like?
Yeah. Yeah,
Like,
I started out as a neurodevelopmentalist. I worked with just kids for the vast majority of the beginning of my professional career. So I'm very skilled in being able to see organic neurodevelopmental delays and disorders. Like that was always my
mhm,
jam before I got into environmental exposure. That's where the history comes into account, being able to parse it out because it can look similar on the brain maps. So that's why I was saying, like, with the people that I work with, I feel compelled to have them do some of the testing to see if there's environmental exposure based on the brain map and the history.
mhm.
But the
No,
answer
it
is
makes
yes. The answer is yes. Like especially when it comes to pans and panda, when it comes to people who have like anything orthostatic, uh, a lot of issues that children have, that anything late onset is not neurodevelopmental. I get on a little soapbox about that because I work with adults where they'll be like, I have adult onset, this or that. I'm like, that's a neurodevelopmental disorder. You can't have late onset that. Yes, you
yeah.
can recognize it, but then I go through the history and either you did have it when you were young or you didn't. So for anything that's late onset, that can really show that it's neurological dysregulation or dysfunction for a system that was developing in a healthy way and now has taken a hit from something.
Yeah, it's like your body telling you, it's like trying to get you to realize that there's something wrong. And this is how it's showing you that there's
Yeah,
something
and
wrong.
if I have started to say, and I'm going to be saying it more and more and more and more, is that when you start to get symptoms, your body's whispering at you. Then your body starts talking to you, and if you ignore it, your body will scream at you. And trust
Mhm.
me, my husband did not believe me. My husband, his defense mechanism of dealing with very difficult stuff is denial. He and I just had this conversation recently because I'm like, I said to him, of course he's like hanging his head low, but I'm like, can you believe how long it took you to believe me that something was up? Like, I literally looked like I was going to die. And he's like, you're fine. It can't be the house. I moved out by myself. Of course, I got a place big enough for the whole fam, but I'm like, I have
Yeah.
to leave, bro, and see if I can get better. I moved out. I started to get better right away. And then he believed me.
Yeah. I mean, what you're saying happens all the time. And it's
Hmm.
funny because the linear thought process you just described is what everyone says. It's like, how can it be the error in the house if no one else, if you're the only one?
Hmm.
And the thing I always go back with people, like, you could talk about how it works in the body, like all these things, but like just the broad thing is like, okay, so if that's true, how is it that last year when I got the flu, you didn't get it?
Right. Right.
How is that
Yep.
possible? Because
Yep.
we were breathing the same air. It should not be
Hmm.
possible if
Hmm.
that is true in both cases, right?
Right.
So, like,
Exactly.
if you can accept that someone in the same house can be sick and not the other person, then you need to be able to accept that something in the air can impact somebody, not the other
I mean, it's terrifying, especially when you're looking at like
one.
how expensive it generally comes down to the finances, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
But
yeah,
I will tell
that's
you, like, I think, and I know people who are still struggling through it, like, I think it was probably one of the greatest gifts on the other side. I will remain healthier for the rest of my life because of a lot of the protocols and practices that I've put into place. we've actually updated our entire house. So not only is it more beautiful than ever, it's the cleanest place on earth. If there's ever a zombie apocalypse, y'all are welcome here because we have the freshest air, and having the freshest air, I didn't know about any of this. Like, I think about my parents' home, like they never cleaned the HVAC system. I don't think it's probably ever still been cleaned. You know what I mean? Now
Yeah.
we have everything cleaned, annually or every 6 months. We clean our home differently. Like it'll be a gift for my health moving forward and for my kids. And of course, in the moment, you don't want to have to invest in it and you don't have to deal with it. But if you do, you can come out the other side much better off for it.
100%. I mean, listen, I'm one of those people that think things happen for a reason.
Me too.
The reason I this exists is because I had an issue, and that's
Hmm.
why. Otherwise, if I didn't have that issue, that we expect wouldn't even be a thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's I'm a very big believer of that. So let's do like maybe two more things. So
Hmm.
somebody's impacted, they go through, we kind of understand that that environment's triggering these issues in the brain that we talked about. What can you talk through like what the difference of somebody who doesn't necessarily do like neurofeedback and like retraining of the brain and they just remove the exposure, but they just kind of let everything stay? Like, what is the difference in that? And is there timeline differences? Is there long-term differences that won't really resolve themselves? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, absolutely. The easiest way to think about it is when you're exposed to environmental toxins, your brain becomes miswired, right? Like that's what autonomic nervous system dysfunction is, an easy way to think about it. So when you remove yourself from exposure, you are then unwiring. You're trying to unwire the miswiring. And that will happen to a certain extent. Like I told you, I moved out of my house. I immediately got better. I didn't get all the way better. It took me years. I immediately ticked forward, 5%. But when you use brain training, when you do all the things that people learn in terms of detoxing and sauna and ion cleanse and red light and all the things, which I've done all of them, oxygen therapy, all those things are rewiring. They're addressing the mitochondrial dysfunction. They're addressing the autonomic nervous system dysfunction. So if you just leave exposure, you're unwiring. What I want for people is for them to rewire their nervous systems back to the healthiest version, maybe even healthier than ever, and hardwire that in. The hardwiring it in is continual practice of keeping your brain in a healthy spot, continual practice of keeping your environment healthy. And I think it comes down to, routines and habits that allow you to stay out of sympathetic dominance and engage parasympathetic. And it allows you to keep detoxing. It allows you to balance your brain and never overextend it again.
So someone starts working through with you and you figure out the plan and you program the protocols into the app and they're kind of working through this. Is it something they need to do? I mean, if you're hardwiring at some point, it should work at some point. You don't have to
Yeah,
keep
it's
like fixing
it's
it,
4
right?
months. It's a 4-month program. So it's not a
Got
lifetime program. It's 4 months long, and after 4 months, people who work with me can stay in the program month to month as long as they want or need to. And again, all my work is driven by scientific data. We can always see how your brain is improving. So basically, we always see where your brain started, whatever level of dysfunction, how much improvement it's made, and where you are on any given day and how much is still left for optimization. So if people want to stay in the program until they fully optimize, they can stay as long as they want. I actually have some people who are like, this is the most amazing thing I've ever done. I'm doing it forever. But then
it.
most people, it's 4, 5, 6 months. It's not like a lifetime.
Interesting.
And you can see it come down. Like the coolest thing, another client who recently started with me, like in a month, that sympathetic dominance shifted down. She felt completely different. And then
Mm.
that allowed her to do some of the other healing things that then took hold and synergized. That's the rewiring, and I haven't talked to her in a little while, but she'll be well on her way to the hardwiring with that shift. But then today I talked to another client who she's been working on it for a while, and I had to reframe it for her lovingly. I'm like, this comes with no judgment because I have been where you are. I can see in her brain stress spikes up and down, up and down. I can see on any given day her brain can get to the optimized version. And I always say, if you can get there once, you can get there always. But then I said, yesterday your brain's super stressed out. What was it about? She's like, I didn't feel well and I was stressing what I should do about it. And I told her, I've been where you are. The energy of I've got to try more and harder, that is sympathetic dominance. So when you want to try harder and you want to push, if you're having a rough day, that's what pacing is. On a day, try to see, why do you feel worse today? It's generally because you pushed too hard the day before, like when you're in those early stages. But, I said to her, keep doing the training. It's paying off because you can get to the optimized version. But when stress hits, reframe it, and then I encourage her to do what I'm telling people here to do is set up your schedule of the things that work for you and don't try to jam everything in. When you're trying to jam healing in, you stay in sympathetic dominance.
Yeah, it feels overwhelming, like you can't keep up, and then you feel like you're failing because you're not doing everything.
Absolutely.
So you could see it happening. So are they wearing the device like consistently, like that's on
It's
their brain?
30-minute sessions each day, but many of the people who I work with who are in a dire situation and they want to get better faster, well, first of all, I can identify they have high levels of dysregulation in their brain, but they will do 2 or 3 sessions a day. And of course
Yeah.
I make that recommendation. So people will do a 30-minute session in the morning, especially if you're really sick, you've got the time. I've been there, 30-minute session in the morning, 30-minute session in the middle of the day, 30-minute session in the evening. And they're like workouts, you don't want to do a 3-hour workout. You won't be able to walk the next day. But if you go for 3 30-minute walks, you'll feel invigorated the next day. It works that way.
This is so cool. This is so
It's the
cool. And the way
coolest.
that
And to talk
yeah.
about the utility in other aspects, like with screens, and this applies to people who are struggling with environmental exposure, chronic illness. Screens, long story short, screens wire and tire our brains. So now you're sick and you're in front of your screen all day. It's actually locking in the sympathetic dominance, but you don't have the energy to go for a walk. Like, staying off screens can be really powerful. So I use my tech basically mostly for screen addictions, but I work with peak performers. I have professional athletes that work with me because they want to keep that edge of keeping their brain in the calm focus mode, or lawyers, CEOs, high level
Mhm.
professionals. It's a really good way to anti-age, like Dave Asprey would say, who he started because he had mold poisoning, but now he's on a mission to be in top shape.
Yep. Yeah. This is very, very cool. The what you were just mentioning, like the just like higher like I'm interested from that point of view.
Mhm.
Like I think that's really cool. I'm gonna talk to you after this,
Yeah.
and talk about it.
Yeah,
But even
for
just like
sure.
going back to I just hear so much about kids and the anxiety with kids and all the things with kids. Like this is such an interesting thing, and knowing it makes sense that some of the obsessive these things, like it's all there's like this, they can't control it, like what it's happening. So like having it tied back to the autonomic nervous system, like you're talking about, makes like so much sense.
Yeah, and
This is good.
I think it builds compassion and empathy in parents. Like, if you can understand, if your child's doing these things, like, they're not choosing to. They
Mm,
have dysregulation in their brain. Like, if you start seeing the symptoms as a product of brain dysregulation or neurological dysfunction, it just becomes so clear, and you can see, and they don't want to, you know, have a tantrum. Tantrum is lack of self-regulation skills, which equals neurological dysregulation. So the symptoms are born out of the brain. That's where the solution is too.
this was such a cool talk.
Yeah, cool.
So I feel like we went like multiple places, but like to wrap this on like the path that we started, and I think you said it really well. Removing exposure, kind of solving sort of the starting problem is unwiring what we
Mhm,
talked about, but then you have a lot of wires that are just laying loose. And
mhm.
to really get back like quicker and more effectively and more, just more completely It's now going back into rewire and put those together. In my mind, again, analogies of how I am. When you remove exposure, that's the equivalent of like remediating and removing the walls, removing the stuff. But once you remove the walls and you remove the mold behind the walls, you still have open walls that haven't been closed yet. You have studs that are exposed. You have unfinished floors. While you can technically live in that space, you're probably not going to be as comfortable as you would like to be in that space. And really, what you do is say, okay, now I need to put my house back together so I can feel complete and finished.
Yes.
And that to me is what this feels like. This feels like I'm going to put my house back together once I gotten rid of all the bad stuff. Let me put it back together. So
yeah, definitely. Yeah. That's a great analogy. And then that's the rewire. And then the hardwire is you protect your house moving forward. So you never have to rip everything down to the studs again.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much for
yeah, no problem. My pleasure. I'm on a mission to help people because I know how stuck I was for so long. Even being fairly educated in this stuff, I didn't know all the inner workings of environmental toxins. I didn't know that at all. And when I figured it out, I'm like, I actually got better a lot faster. I was so stuck for so long. And I know a lot of people who, you work with are probably in the same place. Like I waited to go see a mold doctor who was, proclaimed to be the best doctor in the area. I waited for 9 months. I went to see her. She told me to move to Arizona. I'm like, you must have more for me. Somebody must have more. So I felt like I had no choice. I started to dig into everything. And now I can, pretty successfully help people get the ball rolling. Like you said, there's an order. I can get the regulation rolling. Things start to get moving. And then I can help people find the other people to help them with the other pieces. That's basically how I do it.
Yeah. Well, what you're doing is amazing. I think it's awesome. And it's like it's what 2025 and whatever year we're in. It's like, these are the things you can do now. Like, it's great. It's like, you could dig into these like very specific things that can have like meaningful impacts. I think it's so cool. So
yeah, definitely. Like I use the analogy too. Like if your heart rhythm is off, like, yeah, you can do all of these smaller things, like start working out a little and eat better. But like, if you need a pacemaker, if you get a pacemaker, your life's different, right? And we don't have to implant this in you. This is a wearable that you only have to wear for a few months. And then we have a maintenance program to teach you how to keep your brain there. But like, you can struggle with the arrhythmia for so long, or you get a pacemaker and you're ready to rock and roll again. That's where we're at with technology. And it seems so out there, but it's really not. It's really not. It's here. Just most people don't know about it.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming on. How could people find you to dig into this more if they want to with you or look into it?
Yeah, absolutely. At my website, drtrishleigh.com, there's a tab that says chronic health. When you click that, it gives you a wealth of information and you can dive into resources, tools, and you can learn about my programs there too.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here. I'm excited. I'm excited for this one to go out. It's going to be a really cool one. So thank you so much.
Yeah, I think so. I hope it helps people. That's my goal.
I think it will, because this piece of it doesn't really get talked about a lot. And you said at the top, like, your brain runs your entire body. Like, it's the master computer of everything.
People forget. We don't or just don't know.
It's on it at all. So yeah, I think this will be really helpful. All right. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. Have a great night.